Discussing macroeconomics is really nice as long as one is able to understand it and put the pieces together. So in this class, we'll be talking about the long run aggregate supply curve. I promised in the previous class that this is what we'll be talking about in the next video, and here we have. Now recall our two assumptions when we were deriving the short run aggregate supply curve. There were actually three assumptions, but I've summarized them into two. So the first is that wages are significantly higher than other input costs. Okay, where wages represents labor cost. So we are talking about the total wages, okay, in the economy being significantly higher than the total input costs, the aggregate input cost, or whatever it is. Now, second is that other prices are flexible except wages. All right, that is output prices. I was trying to say in that video we're trying to describe when we're trying to derive the is the aggregate demand curve now. Okay, we're trying to derive the aggregate supply curve rather. Okay, I will try to look at why is it upward sloping. That output of some firms are inputs of some other firms. So saying that output prices are increasing is also saying that input prices are increasing. Although I'm not trying to say that all outputs are being used as inputs of other firms, but I'm just trying to say that all outputs, the increase in price of all outputs simply means that there is an increase in the price throughout the economy, okay, of output that consumers are consuming as final product, as well as those of output that firms are using as raw materials. Okay, so the only cost that isn't responding as fast as how other prices are responding, okay, is the price of labor, the cost of labor, which is wages. Okay, so wages, and I was trying to say that hypothetically as well, or let me say empirically, it is usually the case that wages don't rise as fast as prices are rising. Okay, the average price level could have risen for a year before laborers then come together. It's not, we are just assuming here. One big assumption that we are doing here is that all laborers are kind of the same. Okay, and but in the real world, laborers are not the same, and you have unions, trade unions, here labor unions rather, labor unions here and there. The labor for computer scientists is not the same thing for the labor market for computer scientists. It's not the same labor for economics professors. But here we are assuming that laborers are the same, okay, inherently, whatever. All right. And so when there is an increase in the average price level over a period of, it takes a period of time for laborers to then come together to negotiate higher wage contracts based on using what has been happening to prices over the past years or over the past year as evidence, okay, for their arguments for an increase in wage rates or salaries or whatever it is in the real world. Okay, so that's that about that. Then another thing that I should note here is that it depends on the textbook that you are using, because you might be doing research on these things as you are learning them. Okay, the aggregate demand curve may not be a straight line, so it may have a little kind of bend and so on, but it is downward sloping necessarily. So I don't think that should be a problem. Alright, even normal demand curves, are they always straight lines? Okay, but so it's okay, it's okay. So here, how do we obtain the long run aggregate supply curve? So the assumption here is that initially at this point, this economy is at equilibrium. When we're looking at the effect of monetary and fiscal policies on the price level and the equilibrium price level and the equilibrium aggregate output in the view that was preceding this one, we had many equilibriums, okay, many equilibria. So here if you notice then that the equilibrium positions we had were not really where, like, they were kind of different. Okay, they were unique in themselves, and then they were kind of different from the one where the capacity of firms are actually being utilized. So when we are talking about capacity of firms, talking about capital stock, labor stock, if there is land, the stock of land and other raw materials, other natural resources. Okay, when you're looking at land in economics. Anyway, my story is too much. Right, but here, this economy is already at equilibrium, and at this point, this is the point where in books you could have them being said that the economy is at the potential GDP for this economy is equal to actual GDP. Okay, so where you have that is simply the long run. But now there's something that's going to distort this economy from being in the long run, which is going to be an increase in aggregate demand. Now, an increase in aggregate demand, which could be as a result of an expansionary fiscal policy or monetary policy, okay, as with whatever tools that are being used to make that policy come into play. So when there is an increase in aggregate demand, whereas the economic relation, now there's something I should also let you know here is that when you're talking about potential GDP, I don't know if you've seen the video on potential GDP that we did several months ago. I think even up to 6 months now. Okay, so I was in that video. Potential GDP is talking about the total output that an economy can produce given the efficiencies of its resources. And what efficiency really means is that you're allowing laborers to work for, let's say, 8 hours. So 8 hours could be the definition of efficiency. Okay, and then you're allowing your stock of capital to operate, let's say, maybe 12 hours a day, or let's say 8 hours a day as well. Okay, so now in the short run, you can actually increase the use of your labor. For example, you could let your labor work overtime. So, and laborers, I'm just trying to use laborers as an example so that you get what I'm really saying. Okay, so you can increase labor hours to, let's say, 10. Okay, and then you have some laborers working overtime. So that's at that particular portion, what the economy can produce is going to be greater than what the economy is producing is going to be greater than what has been estimated that the economy would be able to produce when it's efficient. So saying that using labor at this rate, 8 hours a day, using your stock of capital these hours a day, then throughout this particular year and so on and so forth, this output is what this economy can produce, and that is what's called the potential GDP. So actual GDP may now be equal to that, okay, in the sense that actual GDP may be based on the calculation that has been done to obtain the potential GDP. So laborers would actually work for 8 hours a day, that is, they are working efficiently. The stock of capital and other stocks in the economy could be operating at what has been estimated that they are going to work at. Okay, so that means what the economy would eventually produce will be equal to what it has been expected to produce based on its potential GDP and actual GDP calculation. But there is also a portion, okay, there's also a period where the actual GDP may be greater than the potential GDP, but then it comes back. Okay, for example, if you are asked as a viewer to work for 8 hours, 8 hours is the norm, basically 8 to 4, 9 to 5 or something. If you are asked to work for, let's say, 10, 11 hours, you might be able to do it, but at some point you are going to break down, okay, and then that brings you back to spending your normal 8 hours at work. That's if you're employed somewhere or not, okay, and that's not talking about if you're an employer or something. As an employer, there's also an extent to which you are going to break down, okay. So let's just put all of those stuff aside, and I'm just trying to make you understand what all of this is if you've not gone through that class before. So if there is something that brings about an increase in aggregate demand, okay, that is then shifting the aggregate demand curve. So let's say here, so this is what we call we're having a new equilibrium. So here, so this is point B. All right, so you're having this price level. I think I can get here. It's not really long. Okay. And then we're having this equilibrium output. So this is the potential GDP. So here we have a new, okay, let me call this Y1. So here the economy is out of, so the actual GDP is better than the potential, is already out of equilibrium. So now what happens, okay, we have this new stuff here. So what happens here is that an increase in the aggregate demand curve will lead to an increase in output, right? As well as an increase in the price level. Okay. So we've assumed that there's a part of price that is not increasing, that is wage. So firms can actually increase output here because wages are not increasing. Wages are sticky; they are not increasing as much as the price are rising. So here wages have not even really risen. Okay, so what's the gap that is here? The gap that you have here can be called the wage. Okay, let me bring it down. The wage price lag. The wage price lag. Okay, that is, there is a gap between the way the wages are rising and the way the prices are rising. So there's a lag. Okay, the prices are rising faster than the wages are rising. In fact, we've not even said wages are rising at all. Now, this shift is not also just Okay, so it could happen once, all right, and it might be gradual. That is, you could be having more curves in between AD1 and AD2. All right, where this curve is just moving gradually like that until it gets to this point and settles there. Now, after this point, after a while, because at this point you are using labor in excess of what is optimal for the economy. So after a while, and before that, okay, and then some of the workers are already working overtime, and then what do you call it? Some of the workers are working overtime. Firms now have to, because there is pressure on what should be produced due to an increase in aggregate demand. So firms now have to also employ, as these firms have to influence more laborers, so more people to come into the labor force. All right, and but that's also part of what I was talking about, using potential GDP. Okay, so because there is a labor force that is being used, all right, to calculate the potential GDP. So people in the labor force might be greater, and at this point they are actually greater. Like people that are estimated to be in the labor force here, all right, are lesser than the people in the labor force here. Okay, which means that because there's a pressure to produce more than what has been specified that the economy can produce optimally, firms now have to find a way of bringing new workers, and all of these things are going to be contributing to increasing. You might be wondering that how is that possible? Unemployment is never zero. So that's what you should know. Unemployment is never zero. So there are still going to be some people outside of the labor force. Okay, there might be discouraged workers. Okay, there might be students. Okay, maybe the age to join labor force is, let's say, 18. There might be 17 when this calculation was being done, and at this point they're already 18, so which means that they can work legally. All right, so at this point firms now have to be bringing those kind of people in order to ensure that there is an increase in output. Okay, that's going to respond to what has happened here. But all of these things are going to be adding up to the cost of firms, and over time the laborers here are also going to be demanding for more wages. All right, besides the wage that is beside the wages that is being paid for people that they are just bringing in, those that are working in excess would also, in excess of their normal time, would also start to demand for more wages. So on and on. Okay, you need to pay laborers for working overtime. You need to pay new workers. They are stretching your workers, so they want more money than what they wanted before. The price level is making their purchasing power low. Okay, and that means they need more wages to compensate for what they are losing out on their purchasing power because of an increase in price level. So all of those things are going to contribute to an increase in cost of production of firms. Okay, which means that their their short-run aggregate supply curve is now beginning to shift inwards gradually. But then we assume that the final shift is here. Okay, which means that this guy shifts inwards this way. Okay, so you have S2. Like I said, it's not a jump. All right, so you have curves in between, so it will be coming in little by little up till it gets to point C. Now if you look at it, so all of these things will happen until the economy is restored to its long-run equilibrium again, where its potential GDP is equal to its actual GDP. So cost of production will be rising, shifting the short-run aggregate supply curve little by little until it rests where the economy, because here it's more or less like saying the economy is overheating. Okay, it is doing more than what it should do. So something has to happen that will bring the economy back to its normal position, and which is here. So this, which is talking about what the economy can accommodate, the output can accommodate to produce. So by the time we trace this guy up, okay, just join the straight line. So this broken line, the broken line here, should I leave it as broken lines? Okay, no, let me just draw a. So by the time we connect the lines, okay, so this straight line is now what we call the long run aggregate supply curve. So the long run aggregate supply curve is vertical. It's vertical. So you have this and went from point A to point B, then back to point C. So if the economy is already at a long run, just kind of whatever expansionary policy is pursued at that particular point will eventually be passed up. No, notice what I said, will eventually be passed up as an increase in the average price level with output not changing at all. Okay, so that means the total change is going to be this. So the change is here. So from P1 to P3. So that's what is going to happen. So if something happens and aggregate demand increases again, that means it's going to be passing up as an increase in price level in the long run, because the economy basically can't produce anything more. It's already at its excess it's already at its capacity, already fully utilized here. So any other thing means you want to overheat the economy, you want to overstretch it. Alright, so that's about that. So don't go aggregate supply curve is vertical. It's vertical. So what else do I need to note? So you move from point A, you can put the arrow here, point A to point B to point C. So the wage price lag that was existing before then closes up, and then they are restored to this particular position. So this simply means that if government wants to, let's say, government wants to expand, wants to pursue an expansionary policy, what it can do is to study the wage price lag. Okay, that is how slowly or how fast can how can the wage rates in the economy, which is talking about the total wage rate in the economy, how fast is it going to increase? How fast is it going to increase to what the average price level really is? I don't know if you understand. What I'm just trying to say is that how fast is this gap going to close? Okay, so if from moving from point A to point B will take several years, so this the government of this particular economy could pursue a reasonable amount of fiscal policy that would increase output here and at least lower unemployment, because it employs more people, it makes more people come into the join the labor force. Is it lower unemployment that way? I'd rather say increase labor participation rates. Okay, that's how I'd rather put it, because you have more people in the labor force now. Increase labor force participation rate, increase the labor participation rates, and so on and so forth. So what government then studies is, okay, how long is this wage price lag going to exist? If it's going to close up in a matter of 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, then pursuing an expansionary policy doesn't really make any sense. Okay, but if it's going to take several, that is, it's going to take several years for A to come back to C and then reflect in a very high price level, then it is making sense for the government to pursue an expansionary policy, at least at this period, and that's going to be effective between point A to point B. But if this would only exist for like 2 months and then it close up, so that means if the government pursues anything, after 3 months, this is what you are going to be having as a matter of price level. But if this is going to happen, let's say 3, 4, 5 years, that means after 5 years, you are going to have an increase of our price level from P1 to P3, and it just can happen in 5 years. So, which means that it is reasonable to pursue an expansionary policy if the wage price level is going to exist between let's say 5 years and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's about that. There's no assignment in this video. There's no assignment. So I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.
Please like and subscribe.